When Oliver Hardy passed away on August 7, 1957, the world lost one half of one of the most beloved comedy duos in history, Laurel and Hardy. For decades, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy had been more than just comedians. They were symbols of pure joy, timing, and heart. Together, they had brought laughter to millions around the globe through their impeccable slapstick humor and that magical chemistry that couldn't be scripted or replicated. They weren't just partners on screen. They were soulmates in comedy. So, when news broke that Oliver "Babe" Hardy had died, the entire world mourned, and everyone naturally expected Stan Laurel, his closest companion for over 3 decades, to be there by his side one last time. Yet, when the funeral began, Stan Laurel was nowhere to be seen. To many, that seemed cold, even shocking. People whispered, confused, how could a man skip the farewell of his best friend? How could Stan not attend the funeral of the man who had been by his side through every laugh, every success, and every struggle? But the truth was far more heartbreaking than anyone could imagine. Stan Laurel didn't stay away out of indifference or pride. He stayed away because he was completely shattered. The loss of Oliver Hardy broke something inside him that could never be repaired. By the mid-1950s, Stan's health had already begun to decline. He had suffered a massive stroke in 1955 that left him weak, frail, and partially paralyzed. Doctors had warned him to avoid emotional distress or physical strain, fearing that another stroke could be fatal. When news reached him that Hardy had passed, the grief hit him harder than any illness could. He was bedridden, emotionally destroyed, and incapable of facing the sight of the man who had been his constant companion in laughter lying lifeless in a coffin. Stan once told a close friend, "I couldn't go to Babe's funeral. I couldn't stand to see him dead." To the world, Oliver Hardy was a comedic genius, but to Stan, he was family, a brother in every sense of the word. For over 3 decades, the two had shared almost every part of their lives. They rehearsed for hours, crafted scenes until every detail was perfect, and shared quiet moments between the chaos of fame. They understood each other without needing words. There was a rhythm to their partnership, an unspoken connection that went far beyond scripts and slapstick routines. Seeing Hardy one last time in that state would have broken Stan completely, and deep down, he knew he couldn't bear it. Instead of attending the funeral, Stan stayed in his small Santa Monica apartment surrounded by memories, photographs, letters, and mementos from their long career. The walls were covered with reminders of the laughter they had shared, the films they had made, and the moments that had defined both of their lives. Stan mourned in silence. He didn't need a funeral to say goodbye because in his heart, he had already been saying goodbye for years, watching Hardy's health fade as illness took its toll. He once said softly, "I was with him all the way. I didn't need to see him there." After Oliver's death, Stan Laurel was never the same again. He refused every offer to return to film, no matter how large the paycheck or how flattering the script. He couldn't imagine standing in front of a camera without his partner beside him. For Stan, performing without Ollie wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. Laurel and Hardy weren't just an act. They were a bond built on love, respect, and a shared purpose to make the world laugh. The thought of carrying on that legacy alone felt wrong to him. The years that followed were quiet ones for Stan. He spent his days replying to fan letters, writing scripts that would never be filmed, and sketching out comedy ideas that he would tuck away in notebooks. Visitors who came to see him in his later years said that his eyes would light up whenever he watched their old films. For a brief moment, it was as if he was transported back to the golden days, when the two of them stood side by side, bowler hats tilted, ready to make the world smile again. Even as his health declined, Stan never stopped speaking about Hardy with affection. Every memory of their friendship seemed to bring both pain and comfort, a reminder of something beautiful that could never truly fade. Those who knew Stan in his final years said that he carried Oliver's spirit with him every single day. To him, Hardy wasn't gone. He was still there in every laugh, every memory, every echo of applause that lived on through their films. And though he couldn't attend the funeral, his heart had never left his friend's side. Because in the truest sense, Laurel and Hardy were never apart. They had been joined by something deeper than fame or laughter, something eternal. Even years later, when asked about Hardy, Stan would smile faintly and say, "He was my friend. I loved him." And that was the real reason he didn't go to the funeral, Because love that deep doesn't need a goodbye. It simply continues to live on, quietly and forever, in the spaces where laughter once filled the air. In the years after Oliver Hardy's death, Stan Laurel became a ghost of the man he once was. Though he lived for almost 8 more years, his spirit never truly recovered from the loss. The joy that once defined his every expression, that twinkle of mischief that audiences adored, was now replaced by a haunting quietness. He spent most of his days in his small, modest apartment overlooking the ocean in Santa Monica, a lonely retreat filled with fading memories of the golden era of comedy. Visitors often described his home as a shrine to his late partner. Photos of Laurel and Hardy adorned every corner, from movie posters to candid behind-the-scenes shots, even little mementos from their film sets. There were moments when Stan would just sit and stare at their pictures for hours, lost in thought. When asked why he never took on another project, he simply said, "It just wouldn't feel right without Babe." That single sentence revealed everything: the grief, the loyalty, the bond that transcended fame. Hollywood, of course, tried to bring him back. Studios offered him cameos, new comedy scripts, even talk show appearances, anything to hear that familiar soft-spoken charm again. But Stan declined every single offer. "I've had my time," he'd tell them politely. "I don't want to be half of something that's gone." For him, comedy wasn't just performance, it was a partnership, a rhythm, and without Hardy, that rhythm no longer existed. Fans continued to write him letters from around the world. They thanked him for the laughter he and Ollie had brought into their lives, and Stan made it a point to respond to as many as he could. Even in his later years, frail and aging, he'd sit by his typewriter and answer every fan with kindness. One letter famously said, "You made me laugh when I thought I never could again." To which Stan responded, "Then Ollie and I did our job." He always wrote Ollie and I, never I. Even in memory, he refused to separate their names. Behind that gentle humor, however, lay the unspoken weight of regret. Stan often blamed himself for not being able to do more during Hardy's final illness. He had watched helplessly as Ollie's health deteriorated due to a series of strokes, rendering him bedridden and unable to speak. Their last visit together was deeply emotional. Stan held his friend's hand, trying to hide his tears, while Hardy managed only to smile weakly, a silent goodbye that spoke louder than words. When Hardy passed away not long after, that moment replayed in Stan's mind for the rest of his life. After the funeral he couldn't attend, Stan became almost reclusive. He would occasionally receive visitors, close friends, family members, or devoted fans who managed to track him down. But even during those visits, he always seemed to drift back into stories of their films, The Music Box, Sons of the Desert, Way Out West.